How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez here on Figure 4 Daily. It is November 18, 2014, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. In a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Tyler Burns. He is the man behind Wrestlecentre, which is a promotion out of Halifax, which has booked a lot of big stars, including our very own Lance Storm. Bobby Roode is going to be on the event coming up this Friday. AJ Styles, Chris Daniels, a lot of others. Going to be talking about the art of promotion and how you can watch their television show anytime you want, free on the internet. So Tyler Burns is going to be up in a couple of moments. A couple of news notes here. For the news today, we're going to head to our interview with Tyler Burns. We're going to be talking Wrestlecentre. You can watch this free on the internet. They got a big show coming up Friday. Bobby Roode is headlining. Should be a fun show. So stand by, everybody. Back in just a moment here on Figure 4 Daily. We are back here on Figure 4 Daily. Brian Alvarez here, November 18th. Very happy today to be joined by Tyler Burns to talk his promotion, Wrestlecentre, the IFWA, and the TV show Voltage, which you can watch right now, no matter where you are in the world, if you have internet. Big show coming up Friday with Bobby Roode, the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, who at this point has got to work somewhere. And Tyler, how you doing?
You had to take a shot at our stars.
That's not your star.
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great.
Your star is great. I'm concerned about his promotion, his home promotion. Where are they?
Right. Well, actually, you bring up a good point because his home promotion is actually right here. As a matter of fact, Bobby Roode started here prior to signing with TNA.
That's right.
Way back in the day. So it's actually kind of a bit of a homecoming for Bobby to come back to Halifax, Nova Scotia this Friday. As far as TNA goes, I can't comment on that, but I think they'll land on their feet.
Well, we've got Lance Storm on the show many times. He's on every other week.
Right.
And a couple of months ago, he was talking about he was going to have a match with Christopher Daniels in Halifax. And it wasn't until you got booked on this show that I put two and two together, but this was your promotion. Lance Storm and Chris Daniels. You've got Bobby Roode. I know AJ Styles was on the show. Some pretty big names coming in.
Yeah, we've actually had AJ a couple of times. The last time we brought him in as a surprise guest because we want to bring surprise elements back to wrestling. I remember when there used to be surprises, Brian, back in the day. We do want to bring in some, top quality names. Obviously, that's really the game plan for any indie company, and that's what we are. We're still an indie company. Is to bring in the big stars, and then obviously the fans will come to see those stars, and then if I do my job right, they'll come back to see the local guys. Lance Storm came down in August, had a great match with Christopher Daniels, and as you know, Lance Storm is a professional through and through, and it was great to have him here as well, a Canadian boy.
Now, how does it work in terms of promotion in the sense that if you have got an AJ Styles, you decide that you're going to make this guy a surprise. And so essentially, you're paying big money for a guy that you're not going to advertise. Now, some people would say, this is a terrible idea. If you're paying all this money, you should advertise the guy, make your money back. But there is the argument, which I presume you're going to make, that if you present a surprise every now and then, you get your fans conditioned to thinking, if I pay my money, who knows who might show up on this show? Is that kind of the way that you look at it?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're kind of the opposite side of that. I think you probably would say that we should promote AJ if we have him on a show. But yeah, it's kind of the idea that the state that wrestling's in right now, as you know, is it doesn't have a tremendous amount of interest. And also people just in general, they only have so much budget for entertainment. So even a guy like Bobby Roode, huge deal in Halifax, the reality is there's going to be wrestling fans that say, you know what? I don't watch TNA. I'm not interested in Bobby Roode. But they're going to say, but the last time I went to a show to see Lance Storm, AJ Styles showed up. So maybe I'll go to the show anyway. It looks like a stacked card because who knows what might happen. So it's that kind of concept, and it was expensive. It was that was actually the same show that we had Lance on. That was a very expensive show, but it creates that element that when you come to our show, anything can happen. Anyone can show up. It's not the first time we did a surprise. It won't be the last. And there could even be a surprise this Friday. So.
Well, I'm generally in the camp of if you're spending a lot of money on a guy, you can advertise. But at the end of the day, the real camp I'm in is the business camp, which is, did you see a big bump in attendance after you brought in AJ as a surprise? And if the answer is yes, then great. Do a surprise here and there. Obviously, everybody can't be a surprise, but there's nothing wrong with a surprise here and there.
Right. Well, there was a decent jump actually, because right after we did that surprise show, we ran weekly for 3 weeks to see. The month of September we ran 3 shows, so that's quite a bit for one venue in one city, and our attendance didn't drop over the course of those 3 shows. And I think part of that reason is because we had just done this huge show with AJ as a surprise, and people were saying to themselves, they're doing a show every week. I'm running out of money, but at the same time, anything can happen on these shows. So I've got to go. I don't want to miss the show that someone else showed up. I know when I was watching Raw back in the day, even when Raw started to get stale, between 2001 to 2006, I didn't want to miss a show because I knew that the one Raw that I skipped was the Raw that Randy Savage was going to come back. So I would always tune in just in case something big happened that everyone would be talking about Tuesday morning. So it's kind of that concept.
Nowadays, the one Raw you miss is the one Raw that the Grumpy Cat may guest host.
Well, and I did miss that last night. Was it good?
You missed absolutely nothing last night, let me tell you. Now, when did you decide, hey, I am going to start promoting some pro wrestling?
Well, I mean, it's a long story, but really it basically comes down to I don't own the company, so I write and produce it. But a good friend of mine, Jason Mosier, who does own the company, really long story short, we were actually probably in 2006, we were watching the Royal Rumble on pay-per-view at the movie theater here in Halifax. They used to show the pay-per-views at the theaters. And I think Harry Smith was one of the entrants. And it just so happened that Jason made a comment about Harry, and the guy sitting next to us said, "Oh, I've wrestled him before." And we said, "You're a wrestler?" And he said, "Yeah." And he pointed at some guys behind us, and essentially they were an indie company here in Halifax. A couple of years later, we ended up buying their ring and doing all the paperwork and starting it up ourselves. That's kind of the condensed version of it.
There's that part of me that always thinks anybody that decides that they want to be a wrestling promoter, they've got to be out of their minds. And maybe that is the case. I don't know. But if you look around wrestling today, there are a lot of independent groups. It's almost like there's kind of an independent renaissance going on. I mean, no one's doing 5,000 people every Friday night or anything like that, but there are a lot of shows that are doing very good numbers. And I'm not just talking like PWG and Dreamers, right. House of Hardcore. I mean, they sold out and had people waiting outside trying to get in. But it seems like if you know what you're doing and you run a decent independent event, there is a subset of fans that miss the way wrestling used to be, and they can kind of get that now at an indie show. Is that kind of the way that you see it?
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of indie wrestling today. I think there's a lot of mistakes being made. I think there's a lot of, for example, when we started this company, a lot of the phrases, the way things are supposed to be, I just throw it the window. So, for example, the concept of keep it simple, I think that's insulting to the audience. And that happens not just on the indie scene. That happens on Raw. That happens everywhere. The idea that let's just keep it simple. The story doesn't have to make sense. There's no logic. 2 characters that hate each other 1 month are now on the same team with no explanation as to why they're suddenly friends, and last month they broke each other's leg. I think that's still a problem in every company. And I think that's why, in large part, a lot of the fans did turn away over the past 15 years. You yourself, you have to watch, but I dare say, if not for your job, I'm sure there would have come a time where you probably would have stepped away as a fan, just given the fact that the current product isn't really geared toward adults, which our product is. We're not a kid show by any means. And I see that a lot on the indie scene, just shows that don't make sense and shows that really don't give the fan a reason to come back. So we'll have an AJ Styles, we'll have Lance Storm and Chris Daniels all in the same show, but the point behind it is to get people to come back to the next show 2 weeks later. Because it's easy to go to a wrestling show and say, okay, that was fun, and I'll come back and check it out in maybe 6 months when I need my wrestling fix again. So I think the key is to make people say, okay, that was awesome, and I've got to come back. So when we did the AJ surprise, for example, we had a show again 2 weeks later with AJ versus Daniels. So the point of that surprise was to pull everybody back in for the next show. And I don't see a lot of that on the indie scene, and I don't see a lot of that up in the quote-unquote big leagues either.
It is amazing when you mention AJ, and probably Bobby Roode this Friday night as well. You put these same guys on a TNA show, a TNA show that has national television, at least until this Wednesday on Spike TV, and they run a house show and they draw a few hundred people. And you take those same guys and you put them on an independent show, and all of a sudden there's 8,000, 9,000, 1,500 people in the building. And, I mean, all I can conclude is that the TNA brand has been damaged so badly that people just won't go to a TNA show. It's not even about the guys. They'll go see the guys if they're somewhere else, but they're not going to a TNA show. I presume that you've outdrawn your average TNA show with many of your events.
Well, what is a typical TNA show draw? I mean, I know they were doing well in New York.
Well, they were doing a lot of the non-New York shows. I mean, we're talking they were doing shows between 400, 500, 600 people.
And so the current tapings, that's the where was that? I know they didn't draw
the Bethlehem.
Right.
They had a 250 that during that set of tapings.
Yeah, and I mean, and you mentioned Tommy Dreamer's promotion. He has the advantage of taking 3 or 4 months off between shows, which can really it builds up that interest, obviously. When you're running on a constant basis, as we were in September,
sure,
and as TNA does, it's going to deplete that fan base, even as you tour, because as you know, the wrestling fan base is so depleted. 15 years ago, I think if I was doing this company 15 years ago, it would probably be 4 or 5 times larger than it is. I think TNA 15 years ago, if they had their ducks in order, would probably have a very strong following. Just generally, the wrestling fan base is down, and I think again it goes back to what we spoke about earlier with just logic, and it's not specific to TNA; it's WWE as well. It's just logic and storylines that don't insult the fans' intelligence. Obviously, when we're watching wrestling, we have to suspend our disbelief. So we know it's a work, but I don't think we have to suspend our disbelief to the point where we have to dumb ourselves down and just throw logic out the window. If it was any other TV series where 2 characters are friendly and then one stabs the other in the back, and then a couple of weeks later they're friends again with no explanation as to why one was stabbed and no explanation as to why they're friendly again, I think fans would tune away from that show in droves. Obviously, wrestling has a built-in fan base, but as far as that casual fan goes, they need to be stimulated. They don't want their intelligence insulted. With TNA, their house shows, I think, it's just promotion is really difficult. So if they're touring and they're going into these small towns, I think you would know more about this than I do, but I'm pretty sure WWE probably has contracts with some of the venues in the hearts of these cities, which means TNA is forced to kind of go on the outskirts, and that makes it all the more difficult to promote a show. So we've done well, but we also Halifax is a really strong wrestling heritage as well, so that's helped us. Roddy Piper started here. Randy Savage with his brother Lanny wrestled here every week just prior to being signed. So the Hart family as well and Grand Prix. So we kind of have that advantage. We're not touring around to towns and hoping for the best. We know we have a built-in fan base where we are.
Now, when did the idea to do the television, the Voltage show start out? Did you know from day one that you guys were going to try and get a show on community television, or did that come later?
We knew from day one. That's my background. My background is film, television, theater. So to do wrestling, I wasn't interested in just doing indie shows just for the hell of it. So we had a plan from day one. So we filmed our first ever show, which also had AJ on it. We filmed that, and that was the idea from day one, because I think it's crucial to have television to get your characters over, specifically with our brand where, and you may not like this either, but we don't have traditional heels, we don't have traditional faces. So our characters are very much based on realism. So in other words, in reality, in real life, there are good traits and negative traits about everybody. And that's the same sort of concept we've taken with our company and our characters. And because of that, it's absolutely crucial that we do have television, because we need to tell that backstory. And we need our fans to see our characters interacting with one another to get an idea of who they are. So yeah, we had that plan from day one.
But I would presume that your characters still, you'll have one person who in general, is usually doing the right thing, and you'll probably have another person who, in general, is not doing the right thing. So unless I'm completely out of my mind, but I would presume that you would have to have characters like that if they're going to be characters like, for example, my mom is probably not going to rob a store. It doesn't mean whether she's a baby face or a heel, she's not going to go rob the bank. So, you can do that without having a traditional white bread baby face that's clapping all the time.
Absolutely, but at the same time, your mom to you, she's a face, presumably. But let's say one of her coworkers doesn't get along with her. Maybe she's the boss where she works. To them, she might be a heel. She's the same person. It's just perspective. That's really what we hit home with our shows. For example, if your listeners tune in now, Voltage, they'll see one of the storylines we have right now going is a character, Tommy Starr. So Tommy Starr would be considered, for the most part, he's a traditional face. So he's a good guy. But at the same time, his father, the situation he's in, his father has medical bills that his father can't afford and Tommy can't afford. So on the show, Tommy, everyone knew about Tommy's situation. Everybody was aware of what he was going through. All of our faces in the locker room would pat Tommy on the back. They would feel bad. They would tell him it's going to work itself out. Nobody really helped Tommy. Nobody actually gave him money. One of the guys that was friends with Tommy is our top face in some regards in terms of reaction, Steve Arsenal. Steve was aware of Tommy's situation, didn't help him out. Fast forward a couple of months, the only guy that really gave Tommy an opportunity to make some extra money was one of our heels. So we've got a face who is forced to work with a heel in order to support his family. And some of the things he's having to do now involves him mixing it up with other faces. But that's reality. I try not to watch.
I don't even consider that a shade of gray character. That's a baby face who's in a bad position.
Bad position, but he's now feuding with other faces who had an opportunity. He's now feuding with Steve, who could have helped Tommy but didn't.
Sure.
The same way, if you walk down the street and a homeless guy says, "Hey man, can you spare some change?" and you say, "I'm sorry, I can't." Well, yes, you can, but you choose not to. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you've chosen not to donate your money to somebody else. It's kind of that idea, but I agree that it's still a face in a situation. But I think everybody has shades of gray in reality. I get insulted if I watch a wrestling show where a face breaks the curtain and just loves the fans. And then somebody else will break the curtain as a heel and just for no reason at all hate the fans. Our concept is our characters are who they are, and the fans can either side with them or not, depending on their perspective.
Now, in terms of the production of the TV show, it is a very well-produced show, and you mentioned that you've got a background in this. Now, I don't know a lot about video production. I know a fair amount about audio nowadays, but have we achieved the point today where you can do a very, very well-produced, high-def, good lighting television show on a rather limited budget? Back in the day, it was very, very hard to have a high-quality television show, but I would guess that for a lot of reasons that prices are coming down on a lot of different things, and if you know what you're doing, you can do it on the cheap, so to speak.
Yeah, it's still expensive, without a doubt. But, with us, we don't have an investor. So our main goal is the only way we generate revenue is through creating quality shows, because that's going to result in people coming to the shows live, and it keeps our television deal going. And the more people that watch our show online, the more money we'll get. So it's a little cheaper, obviously, in 2014 than it would have been probably 15 years ago, but it's still expensive. And the money we make, from the company goes back into the company. And to me, that's an advantage. It's obviously a disadvantage in some ways, not having an investor, not having a big bank of money that we can just fall back on if need be, causes a couple sleepless nights here and there. But at the same time, all of our creative energy is going into creating a quality show, which I think is a huge advantage, because as we've seen with other companies, they're putting a lot of attention on the things that really don't improve the quality of their shows at all. And they're just banking on the fact that people will watch because it's wrestling. So we're not doing that. We don't have that luxury. We don't have the backgrounds. We don't have we haven't been on the air for 15 years. So it's cheaper, still expensive, but I think because we're so focused on keeping the quality so high in terms of creativity and production, I think that's an advantage for us.
Now, what do you do in terms of production? We talked a little bit about TNA, and I remember when they used to come to Kent, Washington, which is a fairly large town, and man, nobody I knew even knew they were coming because there was absolutely no promotion. I saw one poster one time in one restaurant, and that was it.
Wow.
What kind of stuff do you guys do in terms of spreading the word about the promotion?
Yeah, I mean, it's posters. Posters still work. Posters, we do radio. We do television because we do air on Bell. Bell is kind of one of the big boys in the Canadian market in terms of television. So that helps us. But also, just old-fashioned posters do help. Word of mouth. Obviously, social media. Shows like this. So it's kind of we do it on the ground level. But really, again, it just comes back to a quality show. If a wrestling fan sees a new wrestling product that they enjoy, they'll tell their other wrestling fans. Now, there may not be as many wrestling fans for them to tell as there was 15 years ago, but there's still a few around. And I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, I'll hear on your show, Raw was great last night, and then I'll say to myself, you know what? I don't watch Raw, but maybe I'll check this one out. Or vice versa. When you tell me I didn't miss much, okay, well, I'm probably not going to check out that episode. So really, word of mouth still goes a long way. The dirt sheets. There's still the wrestling community, I find, is very connected. So that's really helped us a lot. A lot of positive reviews. People coming to the shows and saying, my God, that was amazing. I enjoy wrestling again. And they tell their friends. And then their friends come with them the next show. I think that's probably our best marketing technique.
What do fans today want out of wrestling? You've obviously got an audience that comes to your events. And I'm sure that you run certain angles they're really into and maybe have an angle here and there that just kind of flops. What do they want? What are they looking for when they go to an indie event?
Well, I think they're, we don't run our shows as an indie show. So we do run it as a full-blown production show. It's a TV series. But I think what they're looking for on an indie show or any other wrestling show, for that matter, is again just not having their intelligence insulted. They want to come to a show, they want to enjoy it. We tend to keep our shows fairly fast paced. I think they just want to be emotionally invested into a character, so that they care whether that character wins or loses. Granted, there's going to be high spots that are going to get pops, but at the end of the day, if they don't care whether somebody wins or loses that match, and I think that's another problem today in wrestling, is just none of the matches mean anything. How many times have we seen a guy that holds a title in a match, it's a non-title match, they'll lose 4 times in a row, and it has no impact on their title reign at all. There's also a lot of matches I find in wrestling today that just are there for the sake of taking up time. So we try not to do that. We try to give a story of some sort behind every match we do. For the most part, just so that fans have a reason to care whether somebody wins and somebody loses.
Who would you like to bring in if you had a dream list of guys that you think you could do a great storyline with?
I mean, it's going to sound like I'm working it, but really, Chris Daniels. I mean, he is a phenomenal talent. Not to steal AJ's moniker, but he really is a great talent. He's our current champion for that reason. We brought him in, and just to see what he could do. It's interesting to see what guys can do in new environments. He's phenomenal on the stick. He's obviously great in the ring as well. But that combination to be able to portray a character, to get an angle over, and then deliver a 10-star match in the ring, that's a 1-2 punch that you can't really put a price tag on. So to have him has been a tremendous asset to the company. Obviously, AJ, he's a huge talent. There's a lot of great talents on the indie scene that, because the fact that there's only 2, or I guess 3 kind of Ring of Honor major companies, a lot of these young talents in the indie scene are completely unnoticed. If we had the money and the time, there's a ton of guys we would bring in and just see how they adapt to our environment and our fans, which our fan base tends to be a little different than a typical wrestling crowd today. It's not a lot of children. It's a lot of adults. And so because of that, they react. You have to adjust your match style to that type of crowd. Again, so I guess in short, my answer would be the guy we already have, Chris Daniels.
I don't want to get you in trouble with anybody, but if the company...
Do it. I like it. Do it.
If WWE came to you and said, all right, send us 2 guys.
Right.
Who are you sending?
If I was going to send 2 guys from our local roster,
that's right.
That's from Halifax. If you watch our show, if your listeners watch our show this week and then watch it next week, you're going to get 2 polar opposites of reaction for 2 different guys. So there's one guy we have, JP Sims, who when he comes through the curtain, the boos are unbelievable. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. He's never done anything remotely heel, really, on our shows. In fact, he's kind of been the superhero on our shows, but he's the hero that is quick to point out that he saved the day. So if he saves the day, for example, 1 week, and then somebody's giving him a hard time, giving him hell a couple of weeks later, he'll point out the fact that he did save the day. He is the hero. He brings it to the table. And I think people didn't really take to that well. So it's gotten to the point now where he actually started our first show with AJ in the main event. That's how Wrestlecentre started. And at that point, he was getting equal cheers with AJ. It was probably 50-50. And your listeners can go back and watch that match. It's all on demand. But now with flash forward to probably 5-6 months later, his character hasn't changed at all. But the perspective from the fans has changed. And it's at the point now where the boos are absolutely deafening. On the flip side, if you tune in next week, you'll see Steve Arsenal. And I kid you not, his reaction when he comes through the curtain at this point, it's deafening, the cheers. It's unbelievable how over he is. I've never seen a guy that over on the indie scene. I would not to take anything away from AJ Styles, but they were on the same show. When AJ came out, the crowd went bananas. When Steve came out, the crowd went bananas. So if there was 2 guys that the WWE would look at, those are 2 guys I think that would get a great reaction. And to me, I think what WWE would be interested in are guys that have managed to get the crowd that emotionally invested in them. A lot of guys can do the moves. That's something that can be taught. They have a training facility now devoted to that. But how many guys can get a crowd to react, to pay money to come and see them? I think that's the art of wrestling. But honestly, if you look at our roster, if you took any 10 of our fans and asked them that same question, I think they would all have different answers. Everybody brings something different to the table. I know that's cliche.
The TV show is Voltage, and you mentioned it's available online. I know that I saw there's some stuff on YouTube, and then I had another link here that was might have just been the community station itself. Where can people watch this program?
Yeah, the link, our station's been great to us, and if it wasn't for them jumping on board in the beginning, there wouldn't be a Voltage. The one thing we got to clean up is the link. It's a really long link. I think there's 79 Chinese characters in it, but the best way...
I am looking at that right now. It's not easy.
It's scary. In fact, I think your producer thought I was trying to send him a virus when I first sent it to him. I had to convince him it was legit. But if you want to get past that, the best way to check us out and watch Voltage with one click of a mouse would just be to go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestleCentre. Center is spelled CENTRE. We have the link to Voltage there. You click one button, it plays. It's just like YouTube, but it's its own private video player. You can also if you want to go to our station's website and just load up the video player there, you can do that as well. But probably the easiest way is just our Facebook page.
And over the air as well, if you're in Halifax?
Yeah, it airs on Bell Community 1 all across Nova Scotia, actually, all across the Maritimes for that matter. So you can check it out there. Although we tend to promote the online on demand because it's a huge advantage that we have over really, if you look at the big 3, if you miss Raw on Monday night, you've missed it. But with us, our broadcaster, because they're new age and they get it, They make their content free whenever you want to watch it online. So that's a huge advantage for us because people can go back if they've missed an episode. They can go back and check it out. Your listeners that are hearing about us for the first time can marathon it. They can go on there and watch every episode from the beginning. Our most recent episode launched yesterday. So, that's where they can check it out. That's probably the easiest way if you want to skip the 79 character link.
Yeah, but you know what? If they're not watching it on television, how do they all tweet to each other together?
Well, that's true. And you know what? That's something that I used to bring up a lot, actually, on our show. Is just that's what wrestling's become now. And with us, we don't give a damn what's trending on Twitter. We don't exist in any universe. We know there's no honor in wrestling, and we're not looking to make an impact. We're simply looking to entertain our audience. And I think if your listeners give us a chance, I think they'll like what they see. If they were a fan of wrestling back when it didn't insult their intelligence, an adult product aimed at an adult audience, I think they'll enjoy it.
And, of course, this Friday night you have got a show, and Bobby Roode is going to be there as he's being billed here, the world champion of TNA. Give us a look at the lineup here.
Well, this Friday is going to be a huge show. As you said, TNA's world champion Bobby Roode, and we can shoot on TNA all we want. They've been in the ring with the big giants, WWE, for 10, 12 years, and they're still in that ring. They're against the ropes right now, but they've been in this situation before, and they came out on top. So you got to give them credit for that and that reason alone. And having said that, Bobby Roode is currently the face of that company. He used to be the face down here back in the day, and it's going to be a homecoming for him. He's going to be challenging Titus, who's a huge talent here in Halifax, and Titus is really now what Bobby used to be. So Bobby in the day was kind of the go-to workhorse in Halifax. Titus is that guy now. So it'll be really interesting to see. And I think fans that may assume they know what the results will be, I think they'll be a little surprised, and there might be some people talking about this show Saturday morning.
And website, Facebook, Twitter, any of that stuff you want to throw out there?
Throw it all out there. If you want to tune in, next week's episode is Christopher Daniels versus AJ Styles on Voltage. Phenomenal match, obviously. The crowds, our crowds have been compared to the old ECW crowds back in the day. Go to facebook.com/Wrestlecentre. Watch it next week. You won't be disappointed. We've got a Twitter. If you type in Wrestlecentre into Twitter, it's there. We're everywhere. I think we've purposefully not gone on to Instagram for that, just so we can try to maintain some of our dignity. But we're pretty well everywhere else.
Well, check it out Friday night, everybody. This is Tyler Burns, Wrestlecentre this Friday night. Going to be a big show, perhaps some surprises, but we obviously can't talk about that here on the program.
No.
But Bobby Roode, the TNA World Champion, is going to be on the show, and you can check out all of the television shows. Head to YouTube and type in Wrestlecentre, WRESTLE Center.
Well, actually, head to Facebook. We're not on YouTube. That's the one
Facebook.
Place. Yes, because YouTube is kind of the competition to our broadcaster online. So
you don't have any videos on YouTube? Am I out of my mind?
No, you're not. You're not out of your mind. We'll promote our local shows. So, for example, this Friday we have a live event. We'll show footage. We have a little thing called Promo Center.
That's what I saw.
Yeah, it's just a video promoting the live event. But as far as Voltage goes, the actual TV series is strictly available through our broadcaster, facebook.com/WrestleCentre.
Facebook.com/WrestleCentre. So there you go. Apologize for that. So check it out, everybody.
Don't let it happen again, Brian.
That's right. It'll never happen again. Next time Lance is on, I will be sure to mention this Facebook and talk about his match with Chris Daniels. I think we were laughing about that match because I think it was promoted like Dream Match Finally Come True or something like that.
It was Dream Match No More.
Dream Match No More. That's right. And he was like, we've wrestled before. I think they'd wrestled like in WCW or something like that. But it's all coming back to me now.
They had collided, and actually Storm was 6-0 against Daniels prior to that. But that was before Daniels really hit his stride. And an interesting story about that show, that was the show we had AJ on as the surprise guest. Daniels' flight was canceled, so he was not able to show up.
That's right.
Yeah, the bell rang. The show had started. He was nowhere to be found. His agent was frantically calling us. He was stuck in Montreal at an airport. We eventually got him there, but we had AJ there as a surprise guest, and nobody knew AJ was there, not even anybody in the back. He was in a car in the parking lot watching cartoons. And luckily, he always brings his gear, but he was really under the weather that night. And we were almost going to have to call an audible and do an impromptu match between Lance and Lance and AJ. And that would have been the first time that they collided. So that would have been interesting, and that could still happen.
That's right. He talked about that on the show. He almost had that match with AJ. So
right, and he couldn't work it out with AJ because we weren't going to get our money's worth from that surprise if people found out about it. And with today's technology, somebody in the back sees them, they tweet out to some of the audience, it's spoiled. So Lance and AJ weren't going to be able to really go over the match at all. They were going to have to call it on the fly, and that would have been cool to watch. Two professionals at that level just show up out of nowhere, never working together before, and see what they can do in the main event of a show in front of 1,200 people.
Or just like the old days, send one guy from one locker room to the car and back.
Exactly.
Just going over some spots. Well, I want to thank you, Tyler, so much for doing the show today, and best of luck Friday with the event. Bobby Roode, as noted, will be on the show if you're in the Halifax area. Make sure you check out all of the shows, facebook.com/WrestleCentre. CNTRE, by the way, the
absolutely,
the Canadian version of the spelling right there.
Yeah,
So check that out, everybody. And thanks again, Tyler, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you again after a while.